Hello, Year 4. Welcome back. Well, in the previous chapter, George Stone has given Pip the little bear. Now, I know some of you predicted that's what the gift was. And at first, well, that seems like a lovely gift, doesn't it? Because the little bear's really sweet and Pip really bonded with him and worried about him. But I don't know. Would it be easy looking after a bear? Let's read the next chapter and find out. Chapter 43. They walked slowly and tentatively down the street, Pip holding the rope, the bear following, neither daring to catch the other's eye. Pip wondered which of them was more scared. Both about the same, probably. Both terrified. He wanted to reassure the bear that he wasn't going to hurt her, but he didn't know how. "We aren't going to the bear garden," he could have said. "You'll never be tethered to a wooden post again, or forced to defend yourself against a gang of dogs," he could have said. But even if he said so, she wouldn't have understood him. Somehow, through actions rather than words, he'd have to persuade her to trust him. Turning the corner, they met a plump washerwoman coming towards them, carrying a bundle of laundry in her sturdy arms. "Good evening," she said. "Lovely bear you've got there." Thank you," said Pip. As the washerwoman waddled past, the bear watched her with nervous eyes, mouth open, teeth bared, ready to punish any sudden movement. Luckily, the washerwoman couldn't have moved suddenly, even if she wanted to, weighed down as she was by a huge armful of shirts and breeches. Calling, "God bless," over her shoulder, she was gone. Pip had passed his first test. He'd saved the life of a washerwoman. He glanced at the bear, wanting to share his sense of satisfaction, but the bear stared determinedly at the ground, refusing to meet his eyes. "Maybe she's shy," he thought. Was that possible? Did bears feel shy? Pip had no idea. He remembered what his father had said about understanding bears. Listen to her. Look at her. She'll tell you how she's feeling. Pip looked at the bear and listened to her, but he couldn't see anything worth noticing. If the bear was trying to communicate her feelings, she had a strange way of doing so. All she did was stare at the ground. He remembered something else that his father said. Bears are always hungry. Maybe that was her problem. She was starving. So hungry that her stomach ached. Pip knew that feeling. When you're that hungry, you can't think about anything except eating. He had an idea, a way to win the bear's trust. He led her through the streets until they found a festering pile of rubbish clogging a drain, a foul-smelling jumble of mud and manure, pea and poo, twigs and leaves, turnip tops and cabbage skins, chicken bones and sheep's teeth, all the detritus of 100 families clogged together in one stinking pile, waiting for a heavy rainfall to wash the whole slithery mess down to the river. A battalion of black rats scampered around the sides of the heap, and 3 ravens perched on top like generals in black coats, overseeing the operation. When the rats and the ravens saw a big bear shambling towards them, they didn't hesitate, they fled. The rats skedaddled across the road and wriggled down the nearest hole. The ravens flew upwards to a safe rooftop and cawed furiously, telling the bear to buzz off, get lost, go home to wherever she belonged. The bear wasn't interested in the opinions of 3 scruffy ravens, though, not when there was food to be found. Pulling Pip behind her, she stumbled forward and fell face first in the pile of rubbish, landed with a muddy splat and started digging. Pip had never seen a creature eat with such single-minded dedication. The bear dug until she exposed something edible, popped it in her mouth, and then, while chewing and swallowing, dug some more, searching for the next morsel. Soon her fur was covered with mud and long lines of goo dribbled from her muzzle, but she didn't care. She just kept eating with wild enthusiasm, as she'd never known such delicacies. She gobbled turnip chunks and chopped up carrot and broken celery stalks and soggy lumps of all kinds of other vegetable, which had rotted so much that they were no longer identifiable. She chewed on a pig's ear. She chomped fish heads. She licked eggshells. She ate and ate and ate until she could eat no more. Then she let out an enormous burp, lay down, burped again, yawned, burped a 3rd time, closed her eyes. A moment later, she was snoring. Pip sat beside the bear, watching the steady rise and fall of her hairy chest as she breathed in and out. He'd have liked to fall asleep himself, but he didn't dare. Not in the middle of the street. Someone would pick his pockets or steal his bear. He wondered where he'd sleep tonight. Not here. Not the globe either. He didn't have a key, so he couldn't get inside when the last actors and stagehands had gone home. Or he'd find somewhere, a ditch or an alleyway, like his first night in London. He tickled the bear's paws to wake her up. She opened an eye, looked at him for a moment, then closed it again and went back to sleep. Pip stood up and tugged on the rope. This time the bear opened both eyes and stared at him with an angry expression, as if to say, "Can't you see I'm asleep?" "Sorry," said Pip, "but we have to get going." He tugged the rope again. The bear just lay there, staring at him, refusing to budge. Pip tugged the rope again and lifted the whip. That made her move. Pip could see the fear in her eyes, the memory of the lashes that the whip had given her. She struggled to her feet and followed him. When they reached the river, the bear glanced at Pip as if seeking his permission. He nodded. "Go on, get in, if you want to." She couldn't have understood what he was actually saying, but she must have known what he meant, because she hurried forward, scrambled down the bank, and plunged into the water with a big splash. Pip stumbled after her, pulled by the rope that was still tethered to her collar, and stood ankle deep in the Thames. He winced. It was cold. Even worse, the sun was just setting, so his boots and breeches wouldn't have a chance to dry out before nightfall. The bear submerged herself, then lifted her head, opened her mouth, and roared. The noise must have pleased her, because she did it again, even louder. If you had been there within earshot, you wouldn't have known if the bear was roaring with fury or pleasure, and you wouldn't have cared. You would have just felt extremely glad that you were sitting in a boat or standing on the other bank, a good long distance away, beyond the reach of her claws and teeth. Sound travels a long way on water. The bear's voice carried up and down the Thames. all the way north to the houses and piers on the opposite bank, all the way west to Rotherhithe, all the way east to London Bridge. People stared and pointed. Someone waved from a river taxi. Pip waved back. He felt embarrassed and awkward and oddly proud. The bear dipped her head and drank for a long time, lapping the river with her long pink tongue, then clambered out of the water and stood beside Pip, sniffing the air. Her nostrils wrinkled. She turned her head slowly from side to side, searching for the source of the smell. Pip picked up the whip. The bear cringed backwards, her eyes half closed, and put up her right paw to protect her face. Pip snapped the whip over his knee and threw the two halves into the river, and the current swept them away. He tied the rope around his wrist in case the bear was tempted to escape, then lay down on his back and stared up at the darkening sky. Soon he could see the first stars prickling through the gloom. So the Bearkeeper, George Stone, who we now know to be Pip's father, when he gave Pip the bear, he gave him the whip too. And when the bear wouldn't get up and move, Pip held up the whip and she moved. Now Pip has snapped the whip in two and thrown it into the River Thames. Why has he done that? What do you think? Maybe he'll explain why in the next chapter. Bye for now.